Hello.
Hi.
Should we start with introductions?
Sure, you go first.
Fantastic. Hi, I'm Jon Binnie. You can't read it entirely, but I'm Jon Binnie. I live in Scotland. I'm married with two kids, and I was in the software engineering and artificial intelligence industry for 26 years, and doing very, I guess, normal things that many normal people do. And then in 2017, I after many years of um, being a bit like Neo in the Matrix, I was like obsessed with ghosts and UFOs and anything conspiracy. And in 2017, I meditated for the first time, and as soon as I started, I had this like incredible experience of seeing like planets and stars and nebulas being born and the energy flowing between them. And that was me hooked. I started meditating every day. I still meditate every day since November 2017. And on that journey, I started talking to spirit guides, channeling their messages and creating songs from them. Um, and uh, I journal those experiences through songs. So there are over 2,444 songs now. And a few years ago, I also started doing answering the call to help. Initially, as I described it, clear dark energies from people, removing energies and entities. And so that expanded out into a whole range of things that I do today, um, including soul retrievals, entity removals, exorcisms, healings, activating people's psychic abilities, coaching people, training. I've done, I'm not sure how many, over 350 client sessions, which I started originally as a hobby. And then just May this year, I left my career and my old career and started my new one in doing all those things I just said. And I also trained in reflexology and mindfulness teaching to also be hands-on as well as metaphysical. That's me.
Yeah, that's such a journey, such an adventure from where you started and where you are now. It's incredible.
Thank you.
I'll start with my introduction. You can call me Nova. I am currently 24 years old. I started my awakening in late 2018, which was also the year I graduated. And my awakening journey is on my YouTube channel. It's in my cult series because there was cults involved that eventually helped me awaken later. And that was when I got into shadow work officially. And that has kind of been the foundation to my awakening and spirituality and healing my inner child and finding um, beliefs that are like healing to my authenticity and my inner self and my happiness. Um, I, I think that's all.
Wow, that's intense. It makes my journey sound like a very slow and gradual, leisurely wander through the metaphysical. Um, I also wanted to. I literally took me that long to realize that that is a microphone next to you. Like that is so cool.
Yeah.
Like now I want like the shiny microphone with the LEDs in it. That's so cool. I love that.
Thanks. Yeah, I was excited to get it too. It's nice. I like it.
It's like it has a life of its own as well. Like it's listening and it's changing color depending on the vibration of what you're saying. That's so cool.
That's actually a really cool way to think of it, actually. Now I can't stop thinking about it.
Fabulous. Um, yeah, what would you like to start chatting about?
Um, I guess I could we're gonna around the topic of like negative entities, exorcisms, demons, and it's a lot because there's a lot of different like religious implications or spiritual implications, and there's a lot of different perspectives ranging from religion to spiritual to like paranormal to people who don't quite know what these things are, that they have experienced them or it kind of gets that part of us, the ideas of these negative things. I noticed that it is often bringing fear into people than it is
Mm.
like empowerment. And I've even seen how some people will like purposely try to provoke negative entities or try to be around these things to try to like make them believe more on like the light side or like the afterlife, or like there's this spark, this implication about like bigger than the material world. Like is there another dimension? Is there spirits? Is there's ghosts? Are these things real? And and I've noticed, especially like within my own journey, because I've definitely seen how sometimes fear mongering is used as a way to get people to believe in either a certain religion or a certain like whatever it is, and that's because it's like fear-based beliefs.
Mm.
And I've I've definitely seen things like that, and it's very strange because when we think about these types of things and we're not like solid and we don't have a strong foundation, they can end up like making us feel like who are we? Am I strong enough? What is this darkness? Like it makes people think about their life in a different way when they
Mm.
get exposed to these things or they look into these things sometimes. Um, and it's one of those things that isn't talked about a lot. Like there's not a lot of information on it. There's, most of the stuff is the movies and the media, but like what about people who have actual experiences, who actually need help, who actually need someone to talk to about it? And most people, they just don't have that. And
Yeah.
sharing part of my journey helps other people who can relate, um, because who do you talk to when things start happening, right? That's what we wanted to talk about. So I guess we could start with the basics, like what is a negative entity? Are they the same as demons? Can they be demons? Or like people need to understand like there's the spiritual implication, because when we think about demons, then we think about, okay, what about souls? What about God? What about source? What about who I am? What about where do these come from? Or how does this happen? Because there's all this like I don't know how to call it, but you just kind of get this feeling of like, this, if this is real, could this mean something else? And what are those other things? And it's like all these different labels and terms.
Mm.
And I've noticed that people kind of want to start with a certain way of seeing something, and then they kind of like work within that paradigm instead of seeing like the whole range of different beliefs, different perspectives, right?
Yeah.
Sometimes people only want to see it through what religion says. Sometimes people want to see a little bit of both, or spirituality, or the different cultures, because negative entities, they've been in every culture. Every culture talks about the bad spirits or bad luck, or things like this, right? And it's always something that in the mainstream, it's always something to be feared, but it's only feared because we don't understand it,
Yeah.
and when we pretend like we know things because we watch movies or because we watch paranormal or because some other authority said so, it's like, but what do we really know? And the people who do know something have experienced it, but how do they talk about something that hasn't really been qualified in the real world? So it's like, okay, these things are happening, but it's like we're quiet about it.
Yeah.
It's we can't do that, because real problems, people need help understanding what these things are. And I hope my goal is that as we're explaining these things, that we empower people instead of making them feel like afraid or feel like they need to become spiritual, they need to change, but just to help them understand things to a point where we don't need to be afraid and we don't need to be scared. And for people who are scared because they are going through some things, that they could also get help too.
Yeah. Wow. Yes. I think well, I know it is a whole universe of topics. And I feel drawn to just start with, first of all, thanking you for like creating this space, like getting us together and saying this is worth talking about. Like it's the universe it's the darkness in the night sky in space is like predominantly dark, right? It's the darkness that everyone, no one's talking about it. It's like, but it's there. Like, it's what's in between the stars. Well, it's black. It's like really dark. Um, and I'd also like to, for whatever this helps this conversation, and at least helps me articulate my belief system. And I'd encourage everyone to like find their own, right? Because
Oh,
it
yes.
nothing's more important than you discovering it for yourself and learning for yourself. I see this universe as one. I see unity when I look at the universe. This took me a long time to get to grips with, because I'm like, really? Like all the like the horrible, most evil things in the universe, I'm at one with? Yes. And like, oh, that's not what I expected. I was hoping for some degree of separation between me and all the bad guys. Like, no, no, no. Like we're all in it together. And even more interestingly is at a kind of super galactic, like universal level, is the human race. There's something very special about us. And that is that we can hold incredibly high and increasingly high vibrations, but we can also hold very low vibrations, almost demonic like vibrations. What's interesting about that? Well, it allows us as beings, as physical beings currently in the third dimension, predominantly, to be able to hold ranges of emotion from shame being one of the lowest to like unconditional love at the highest, and unity. But it's a spectrum from dark to light, and we are everything in between, and each of us unique, each of us at different, frequency ranges, different averages of wherever we are. Our days and our weeks and our months and our lives, we shift up and down this spectrum. And I feel like if I could help, one person listening to this who was going through like the most horrible, you know, demonic attack that we could imagine and beyond, to know that like you're not alone. Like you will be told by yourself and by the things attacking you that you are alone, that you're different, that no one cares about and no one loves you. And they are wrong, because we love you. We're all part of the same universe and we're all in it together. And there's no separation. And that means that I have to extend the evil in me, the darkest part of me, down to the lowest levels I can imagine, to accept that there's part of me capable, either I have been in the past or will be in the future. Part of me exists at that frequency, and that I connect with that, and I love that part of me, and I very least acknowledge it. I very least say, that's part of Jon. And that part of Jon does or did or will do bad stuff. And that's okay, because I love the whole of me.
Yes, the duality, non-duality aspect of it is very foundational. In my cult series on my YouTube channel, I was discussing separation and division, and it's just like you said, it's like when we are not loving of all parts of ourselves and in our darkness, it actually makes, when we judge, that actually makes the darkness stronger.
Mm-hmm.
And so what ends up happening is that if you can't accept yourself, there's like always going to be a little part of you that, just feels rejected. And depending on how bad it is, it can make you feel very like, it can make you feel like really, really bad, and the quality of your thoughts go down, and things like that. And I think that's something that a lot of people have a hard time um, dealing with, because lots of people like the separation division. They kind of like the paradigm there, and the reality is that there's it's how do I explain it? It's just foundational to shadow work, because it allows you to see yourself and all aspects of yourself, instead of dividing yourself and acting like it's not yours, or it's not there, but it is. And this kind of creates this like this in denial, or sometimes people feel like this is the way to think, this is the way to be, and I have to, separate myself, and I have to judge. Right. And this
Yeah.
is only something that you can do when you separate yourself. If you agreed that everything, is yourself, and there's non-dualism, you wouldn't purposely judge yourself. So you have to convince yourself, that's not me. I'm going to put this over there. and I'm going to judge that thing, right? But that's actually yourself. So like you kind of fool yourself into not accepting yourself, and there's consequences for that. And in my cult series, I spoke about how I was deconstructing into my shadow work and recognizing that the negativity, the low vibration I was having was because of dogmatic religious beliefs, and these were the kind that, not judging anyone's belief, but these were the kinds specifically that I am very well aware of, and all my other friends who've experienced this, that there are some that, depending on how you live with yourself and how you interpret those things and how you judge yourself, there's some specifically that really tear down a person's self-esteem, their sense of self, and and then what ends up happening is that you don't see yourself for who you are. And then when you're insecure, all the judgment, all the darkness, all the things, all the limiting beliefs, then those things feel real. And then you end up losing who you really are and thinking that you're someone you're not, which it just, it, you're so convinced of this that you don't realize like how much lower and lower and lower you go.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Yeah.
it's very hard to explain a bit, but to ground this more, it's realizing that we also need to work on ourselves. We also not only need to expand our perception, but we have to at least be willing, to see things a different way, because maybe that perspective is really the issue. It's just, it's the problem is the problem. It's the way you're looking at the problem, you know?
Yeah.
And we're conditioned to look at problems a certain way and to judge things a certain way. And when we're judging, we don't feel gratitude. We don't connect to love, right? And then those judgments create a lot of fear, they create a lot of self-hate, they create a lot of pain and a lot of shame. And it's the shame that prevents people from speaking up, you
Yeah.
know, and it prevents people from healing ultimately, so the non-dualistic aspect of it is kind of recognizing, we played a part, or that, and that we also are a part as well, and it's a transformative thing, you
Yeah.
know, when you are trying to like clear yourself of a negative entity or demonic or low vibration. No, you have to change, you have to transform, so that way you can have a brighter light, a stronger light.
Mm-hmm.
um and it just it changes your whole outlook, your philosophy of life. um
Definitely.
yeah, I hope I made sense. I
Yeah,
talked a lot.
absolutely. I Yeah, there's two things I wanted to touch on there, expand a bit further. One is um the superpower of darkness is illusion, separation, duality, shame, like these the whole superpower of like creating this delusion in your reality is the power of the darkness. Like, if you kind of personified it as a single being with a single consciousness, it would say things like, well, I don't want to be part of unity. Like, that's rubbish for me. Like, I don't want everyone to be like the same and the same frequency or even frequency range. I want to be separate. I want to go and do my own thing. And that's good, right? Like, that's a good tension, against unity is separation. Like, the universe is full of like natural tensions. um the and it's ironic describing something bad as good. Shame is really interesting, but if you think about the power of light, is that light is more powerful than darkness. It's just that light doesn't know it, when it's diluted by darkness. I think your screen froze. Are you still there? Hello, hello. Okay, we're back. We had an internet malfunction, and now we're back. So, yeah, I was just saying that the power of the darkness is the ability to like delude the light, and the power of the light is to be more powerful than the darkness, and so so it goes on. And that, like yin and yang, there's light and dark and light. But I wanted to talk about shame. And I was there last summer in my deepest, darkest shadow work, um, just going almost dead on a year ago now, um, where I was in a situation where I felt like I was trapped in my corporate job. I had this new hobby of like doing these things, like clearing people and negative entities and doing healings for people. And but I was doing it so much that I became like ungrounded. And it's like I was pushing for a dream that I didn't know how to manifest, almost without a clear purpose or of intention. And I lost myself. And I think to many people around me, those, even my family, didn't really understand what was going through there, because it was such a spiritual thing for me, energetic thing for me, and almost like a crisis of my soul. I felt very alone and very shameful, and I did lose some friends at that time. And like, if you just Google frequency diagrams, you often see like a triangle, and at the very bottom is the emotion of shame. And I love that because it feels so right that shame is so isolating, and you're literally like, you're kind of like demon food, right? You're like all
Yeah.
by yourself. And that's exactly how I felt a year ago. I was like, how can I explain this to anyone? Because so many people, even those close to me that love me, would just be like, oh, I mean, you look okay. And you're like functioning and everything. And it's like, no, no, I need to take a break. I need like 2 months off, like energy healings, and maybe I'll stop music for a bit too. Like, I needed to just stop and do my inner work. Um, and I think that's also really important. Like, no one really knows except for you what's going on inside your heart and your mind and your soul. And some of the things that we can be attacked for, that are, to your earlier points, Nova, like, they are really real. Like, they're more real than our laws and our, guns and things and whatever else goes on in the physical world. It's all an energy first universe. And so all those things that you're feeling, like, those feelings are real. And like, if you're watching this, I want you to know that as scary as it might sound that it's real, I hope it helps you in understanding that you're not alone. Like, you've many people, thousands, millions of people go through these challenges, and they're all uniquely different, and they're all often very um, isolating and shameful experiences that you just don't want to share with others. And I also wanted to share that the work that I've done with my client sessions, where in particular soul retrievals, and that's where often during trauma, often in a past life or parallel life,
Mhm.
someone's soul will fragment their soul because of trauma. So let's say you have a superpower of I don't know, creating a resonant frequency from your heart to like help people. If you're in a situation where you went through that trauma and you use that against people to hurt them, but it went wild, like your rage amplified it and it destroyed, like we've seen the X-Men movies, right? Like, people's and many other movies, like your superpowers going crazy, that someone will take that part of their soul and put it often in lower levels of hell, or like that, again, that separation. And so it becomes a part of you you don't want to be part of. But if you're into things like quantum physics, and you're aware of things like quantum entanglement, like that's what it's like. Like, your soul's like, no, 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 no. There's still that part of me, and it's like it's over there somewhere, and I don't want to talk about it. Like, it's separated, and it hurts. Like, it's like dragging this anchor, like this weight around with you the whole time. Um, and only when I started doing that work did I start to see some of the frankly horrific things that our souls have done to each other across different lifetimes, different planets, including the destruction of entire universes and timelines, and genocide, like all these horrible things that you look at Nova and John, like, oh, we like seem pretty happy, upbeat people. Like, you you realize that it's in all of us. Like, we all have these capabilities, and so there's no, even the earthly atrocities that we've seen and witnessed, or the things that we feel is very negative towards each other, in many respects they're like the tip of the iceberg for the true depth of this very dark universe, with those little lights of stars that we see in the night sky. And the feeling of shame, like, you're not alone, and that unfortunately many people have done a lot worse than you have, and that it's okay to to first, and the biggest thing is like acknowledging it, like just seeing that shadow and saying, just like, I see you, like I see that part of me.
Yeah. It was part of my shadow work to talk about my time in a religious cult, and it was at a time where I felt strong enough to talk about these things and to understand these things in a way where it brought myself healing, but to other people who come across my video series on that on my channel, like it it will help them talk about things that they felt like they couldn't talk about. And that's because I'm talking about it, and because there's someone that understands them. I've noticed in the feeling, the experience of shame, there's no self-compassion. It's very like you're hard on yourself, you're judging yourself, you have standards that are too high, and the more you feel bad, the more you feel like a failure, the more you feel, like almost embarrassed of your own existence. That's what shame feels like. You there's no nice way to talk to yourself like when you're feeling feelings of shame. And I've definitely felt that like through my time in a religious cult, but also the pressures, the social pressures for me in my life and my future, especially after I had graduated. There was all this, you know, pressure and not meeting up to standards or not being the expectation. And I feel like especially not just, in the real life, but like also in a lot of at times limiting beliefs, whether they are from a religious nature or not, when we are putting the standard on ourselves and we're not being compassionate, we're not actually being realistic of who we are. We're actually not being realistic of, issues that that we think we're having. Sometimes the issue is the way you look at it. Sometimes it's really the perspective. And when you're not nice to yourself, like you can't be compassionate to yourself, you can't be honest with yourself. And not only that, shame feels, it feels embarrassed to speak. It feels embarrassed to ask for help. And there's this, it's a very difficult way to explain, but shame is just, it's another facet of judgment. And from judgment to being isolated in shame, you you basically start hating yourself more, because before, it's just like you don't like yourself, and then you start to like actually hate yourself, and then the thoughts, the standards that aren't exactly, a reflection of who you are, what you're capable of, or that they don't help you, these, it's the judgments of it. um and people people get stuck in this, in their mind, in their head, because it hurts too much in their heart, and then they start trying to problem solve, but they can't problem solve with limited thinking, because if you wanted to problem solve, you have to be open, but you can't be open if, because of your shame, you can't see another way, you can't see another perspective, you can't see compassion, you can't see kindness, you can't see niceness. So then you're stuck in your head, and your head is telling you, no, you can't think these positive thoughts. You can't possibly think that, because this is your fault, and this is who you are, and this and that, and there's no kindness, there's no mercy, right? And where I was going with that is that it's, the judgment becomes more fear, because then you feel fear that, what if I'm always going to be the shameful thing?
Mhm.
What if other people find out my shame? Or what if I try to speak up, but no one understands me, you know? And there's these thoughts of like fear of like, am I going to be like this forever?
Mm.
And and it leads to judgment, it leads to fear, it also leads to anger, because when you have feelings that you can't express, then you don't just get mad, you get rage,
Mhm.
And whenever we hold in our emotions, um, people will like they'll start yelling, they'll it's a weird way our body, like, it will do that because it helps release the stress, right? But but then it calms down. But because you still haven't fixed the problem with your anger, then you're going to keep doing that to regulate yourself. And so you're going to start lashing out at people, yelling, and getting angry, and you're angry at yourself and you're angry at the world. And this is the way your world changes
Yeah.
when you get into the shame, you get into the fear, you get into the anger, the isolation, and then it feels like this is all that is for you, that there's no future for you and there's no one who would love you. And when you can't express yourself because you're scared of who you are and you're embarrassed of who you are, when you can't express yourself because you're ashamed, it affects every aspect of your life, and not just shame because of one particular limiting belief, or because of religion, or because of someone's expectation, or whatever it is. It affects every area of your life, and shame, it kind of destroys everything. um and it's because it's showing you that your inability to see past shame is showing you where your limitations are at. But like you said, the limitations are illusions, right? And
Mhm.
that's the first step in recognizing that fear is an illusion. And
Yeah.
it might sound it might sound a bit um like what's the word?
Like simplistic.
Yeah, oversimplistic, yes,
Mhm.
because it's something that, yeah, it's great to hear, but like when you're in it, it doesn't feel like illusion at all. No, this is real. And like it is. Like your experience is real, right? But the interpretation doesn't have to be finite,
Mhm.
like yes, you're experiencing, the illusion, and you're feeling the fear, and that's real. That's a real thing. But the purpose of recognizing that it's an illusion means that you can break the illusion.
Yeah.
So saying that it's an illusion isn't telling you that you're crazy. No, what I mean to say is that it's because it's an illusion, it means that there's hope. It
Yeah.
means that you don't have to be this way. It means that, there's still a chance for you,
Yeah.
right?
Definitely. And I want to congratulate you on expressing all that so well. And you did it all without even mentioning that there's things that feed off all the things that you're describing. And what you just described is like it is such a tough journey for us to go, for anyone to go through. And I kept being shown, reminded of this analogy, and it's quite funny because my wife was saying it to me earlier today, is that you can think like there's physical and metaphysical reasons for sharing this, is that our homes, and whether you live like in a single room, in a an RV, in a cardboard box, in a mansion, like whatever it is you live in, whatever you consider home, there's probably some clutter in there. There's probably some cupboards, closets, drawers, an area, at least one, where there's just stuff in there. Maybe even stuff you don't want other people to see. Maybe stuff you don't even want to see yourself. Maybe even just fear of, something in there that you can't see or rationalize. And as you were saying, Nova, when you so if so right now, like my studio outside of my little soundproof studio is our garage, and it's full of clutter because we've been doing lots of different renovation works, and we just keep stacking everything into the garage. And I know energetically it's actually quite dangerous, especially in the work I do, because what you're doing energetically, and it's the same as if this garage was my heart, right? Is that I'm putting all this clutter in, and then I'm saying, oh, but it's okay, John, we'll just draw this nice little box, and you can go and do your little cool work in there, your spiritual stuff, and just you ignore all that stuff out there because that's fine. Oh, but don't go in there. There might be. So we actually found like a dead rat, and we never see rats, but we found one out in the street. My suspicion is it was brought there by a bird or something, but you never know, right? There's always, and it's that fear part. You're like, well, where did that come from? I've never even seen one in this town, let alone like nearby. And these areas left fester, they grow, they become unwieldy, they become the thing you just want to ignore. And yeah, all those things you're saying, like, I'm sure we'll come on to it a bit later, but things like the habits of the coping mechanisms that we put ourselves through, like, alcohol, drugs. I mean, alcohol is a drug, but like all these different things we do, a lot of them tend to like just like it, try and dampen it. It's like, it's okay. Don't worry about that garage of like, you know, of mess and clutter and negative energy that you just want to ignore and you feel shamed about. Let's just like suppress it down, or kind of dumb you down enough so that you're not worrying that you don't have enough mental capability to go through the fear process. And of course, the ridiculous reality uh, is that literally I could just pick up my laptop right now, take you out to the garage, and start throwing things in front of the camera, going, "Look what I found! Like, I didn't even know I had this," and then like, "Oh my god, this is horrible! I'm so sorry," like, but the fear of like even just me talking about it, like the fear is an illusion, and I know that for everything, every big fear I had in my life, like like leaving my corporate job, I'm the main wage earner. I was used to a senior leader, salary for many years in a big corporate company. To go from that to just like what my wife's like, what, doing a hobby for like meditation stuff for people, and it's like, yeah, it's kind of like that. Um, it it was a huge door of fear for me, but there was something pulling me from the other side of that door, and it's like this other version of me, like this future version of me, going, John, like, it's just fear, like, you just need to step through it. And I'm like, I don't know what I'm gonna do. Like, please give me a plan, give me a sign, give me a smooth path out of this. Like, I just want a lifeline to get out of this misery. um but yeah, I'd love to talk a little bit now about some of the experiences with negative entities. And I wanted to also like set some of my founding beliefs, and one is that um, anything in this universe, including like this backdrop behind me, um, could be given consciousness, even a soul in time, um, which is quite cool to think about it. With the right amount of energy and the right amount of focus and attention from beings like us, from beings like us that have consciousness, and we are individual creators and also co-creators with everything that lives around us and everything on the planet and in the universe. Um, and so with that, because I loved what you were saying, Nova, like this, it's so easy to take this conversation into separation and saying, oh, like the demons, they're the big bad ones, right? And then there's like the little demons, they're not so bad. And then there's like the little worms, and they're not as bad, but it can be nasty, and like you start splitting them up. And of course, the dark aspects of ourselves and of these beings and of the universe, they're like, hey, that's cool. Yes, we're all totally siloed. We're all totally separate. And we're nothing like you guys. Like, hang on a minute. um, there's how much distinction really is there? And I do think that's like a huge part of uh like it's this kind of segue, this transition from talking about the shame that we feel, because you can feel ashamed about, I don't know, the screensaver on your phone, just being like, I don't know, of a cat or something that you know that you would find embarrassing to show others. Or it could be something like really quite horrific that you have on there, but it doesn't matter. It's the energy, what it means to you. It's like, how horrible is it for you, and how horrible would you feel if other people saw it? That it's the energy behind it that's the most important thing. And that energy, as you're describing, Nova, like all those experiences we go through of punishing ourselves and trying to cope with these shameful negative feelings we have, and the fear, all that is food for, or loose for, other beings to consume. And they will grow and grow
Yeah.
very big and very large very fast, and provoke you into experiencing that same thing over and over.
Yeah.
um, I'm just going to stop for a minute.
I understand. Yes, I know. It's because once you start getting into that territory, it's like, let me try to explain in my experience. So, talking about shame is really important. I'm really glad we talked about that first because I feel like that grounds it to like where people can relate to. Because once we start talking about this stuff, it feels a little bit more strange and like ungrounded, or it's something that only maybe a few people would understand, right? But I know exactly what you're talking about. I was listening to some of your podcasts. I think you sent me some. I was looking through talking about things like soul fragments and possession and negative entities and things like that. And as I was preparing for our interview, as we were talking about these things, I was like, you know what I get it. Like I know what you're talking about. I was like reflecting and I was thinking about these things, and I have spoken about this publicly on my YouTube channel, and my time in a religious cult, and more specifically the video that I titled "Exiled from the Light," because that's the way I described it. And my journey into this darkness, it started with what I would call unconscious self-annihilation is the best way I would describe it. It's like you're not aware that you're annihilating, you know, good aspects of you, authentic aspects of you. And that's where the shame comes in, because you have to judge it and be ashamed of it in order for you to like have the negative dark experience that I had, right? And so going back to my story, what I was describing about shame, I'm good at describing it because that's what happened to me. Hi, I'm good now. I'm all better. But before things got better, I was experiencing, you could say, I guess the best way I could describe it, like maybe like paranormal or just these weird things that I was just like, you feel like you're going crazy. You feel like you're going crazy, and you're not. And in my experience, um, I had all this shame, right? And I had this pressure for my future and to grow up and what I want to be. And part of the things about shame is that you can't express yourself, and you can't express all aspects of yourself when you're ashamed, because your authentic self is what you're ashamed of. So if you can't even express how you feel, you get angry. And if you can't express who you are, you feel even more isolated than you already are. And
Mhm.
so this is why a person who feels this way, they're around people and they look fine and they seem fine, but on the inside they're really hurt, and they're disconnected, and they're afraid. And that's the thing. Once you get a little bit of fear, then the next fear thought comes, and the next fear thought comes, and the next one, and the next one. And because you're embodying, the feeling, and you're visualizing maybe things that you're afraid of, and you're feeling it, and then you tell yourself negative things, that's a form of manifestation, right? So, and this is what happened to me a lot. And and I described it in my cult series, but in a way, you're actually putting a fear spell on yourself, right? But it doesn't feel like you're trying to manifest anything, because people think of manifesting as moving forward, but like by recognizing where you are vibrationally and how you really embody it, like you don't have to pretend to be afraid of something you're really scared of. You don't have to try so hard to visualize something you're afraid to happen. It's just natural for us when we're afraid, right? And then we say things or we think things like, I'm not good enough, I feel shame, I'm embarrassed, no one understands me. And then you like catastrophizing in your own mind, in your thoughts, in your feelings, in the way you visualize the things that you're afraid of. Like that is a formula to keep you like stuck. And you don't even realize you're doing it because you're just a scared person. You're just a scared person. You don't understand the metaphysical implications of like, once you get started on this path, like it just gets worse and worse. And then you get scared even more because it's getting worse and worse. And so
Yeah.
it's like you're trying to get better, but then every time you just get worse and worse. And then you judge how you get worse and worse. And then the fear, it multiplies and it multiplies and it
Mhm.
multiplies, right?
Yeah.
And then over time, this can get into like the other symptoms of like anxiety, social anxiety, because you can't connect with anyone and then you feel stuck. And then being around people isn't fun anymore because you can't express yourself. And how could you when you're ashamed? And how could you if you're not authentic? So yeah, that's already there. And then you're also angry. Um, I forgot what else I was going with this, but this is the way, my experience, how I felt and how this was happening to me. I didn't realize it until like way after the fact, exactly what exactly happened to me. And as I was listening to your podcast about these things, it actually was helping me make connections that I didn't make before. It was kind of reminding me of those things when I had made my cult series. I kind of just left it there. Like I kind of thought, okay, well, this was just my vibration, and I got better, and I did my shadow work that caused, the darkness and the limiting beliefs and the entities, and I educated myself, on cults. I educated myself on, feelings and all these things. And part of the work that I do now, I am very I guess you could say I'm very proficient in shadow work because that was where my soul needed to grow. And I've recognized, just like you said, Jon, like a lot of people can be going through feelings of negative entities or sensing them or like seeing them and things like that, right? So, when we're talking about the shadow work aspect of it, that is something that everyone has to do. Eventually, whether or not life kind of has a way of pushing us outside our comfort zone. We have a way of wanting to transform. We want to improve, but it's always the fear, the limiting beliefs holding us back. And even more so when there's shame. And because shame is so isolating, you don't know how many other people share your shame. You don't know how many other
Yeah.
people can relate to you. And that's what's crazy. It's like you're ashamed, so you don't speak about it. But because you're ashamed, you don't even realize how you're not alone, right? And
Yeah.
it's the illusion. It's like, how do I explain this? It reminds me of this saying, how doubt kills dreams more than failure ever would. So just
Yeah.
by doubting yourself and just it you lose your courage, you lose that, and then you don't even think about a possibility of a greater future or a better life or something. And it's very hard to even think about those things because these are the types of things that there's no foundation, there's no like general consensus on like how do I build up for here, how do I understand this, where does this come from, why is this happening. And for me,
Yeah.
it all started with the shadow work.
Mhm.
And that's when I started to um try to raise my vibration through the shadow work, overcoming the fear, right? So the more you overcome fear, you raise your vibration, right? And you're more of who you are. And so you're more loving, right? So that raises your vibe. And so the quality of your thoughts are different. The things that you imagine are different, the feelings you have are different. So instead of having this recipe for negativity and fear that the entities feed off, you can have a recipe for living a more authentic life that's true to you, right?
Yeah.
And so you don't have to worry so much about the negative things because they're not attracted to your vibration initially, like you would be if it was like the opposite way, right?
Yeah.
What are the other things, talking about negative entities feeding off of? I think the most grounded like example I could give that doesn't sound too scary when we think about it
Mhm.
is our dreams,
Mhm.
right? Our subconscious mind senses these things, whether or not you can feel or see negative entities. Our subconscious mind is aware of so much more, than what we perceive, right? It's your subconscious mind actually uses metaphors, and it has its own language, right? That it communicates through us in dreams. And so one of the things that I've experienced, in that low vibration was the types of dreams I would have. And they were not good dreams. They were dreams of like demonic beings in my dreams. There would be it would be really weird. There'd be sometimes like scary dreams, and especially when it came to like the demonic parts of it where I'm seeing demonic imagery or demonic beings. But in the dream, when I would have these things, it's almost like I have to fight with them, or I have to run away from them, but every time I would win, so they never won a battle against me. So I'm very happy about that. Um, but our subconscious mind is actually showing us these aspects of ourselves. But there was other aspects that I didn't understand because I didn't know dream interpretation like I do now, right? And as I was looking back at my time, in my religious cult and the dreams that I would have, and I would have these memorable dreams, right? And so for anyone who kind of is going through a similar experience, your dreams will actually be telling you what you're afraid of. So your nightmares are going to be about that shape. Your nightmares are going to be about how it's affecting your body, and whatever case it may be. So your dreams could tell you, hey, because of your shame, you're getting really angry because you don't express your emotions, right? Or they'll tell you, like, for instance, I had this dream about my shame, and it was a very intense dream. All right. I had a dream I was being crucified.
Oh.
And yeah, it was pretty horrific. And I was like on this cross, and I was nailed to the cross, and there was a bunch of, like, a mob of angry people, like as far as the eye can see, and like the sky was red.
Mm.
And I had this dream I was being crucified, and it was disturbing, and it felt weird, you know. And ironically, I had this dream while I was listening to religious it was like a religious conference at the time for my type of religion, at the
Mm.
time. But since then I've left the religion into different beliefs, right? And I had this dream of being crucified, and I didn't know what it meant because I was young, and I didn't get into dream interpretation like I do now. Now I understand it. So later in the future, when I got into dream interpretation, I realized what crucifixion means. When you have this dream of crucifixion, it means that you are metaphorically, because the dreams speak in metaphors, you're metaphorically crucifying yourself.
Mm.
Crucifixion, it's a torture. It's a torture. It's a form of torture, right?
Yeah.
Um, and you're doing this to yourself. Like, and you don't need to, is what the dream was saying. It's, of course, with like the religious imagery, just kind of like, put it all together. And it was interesting because at the time I was pondering, why did I have this dream? Why was I being crucified? That's weird. And, some people suggested, oh, maybe that I didn't appreciate, the sacrifice of Jesus Christ or something, which, was far from it. But, that's what people assumed. But like me hearing these types of things, it made me feel worse because I actually do care. And I cared so much that I was metaphorically torturing myself for not being good enough,
Yeah. Yeah.
and so, sometimes these things happen. And it's like, the person who told me this, I'm sure they didn't mean to hurt me, but they didn't know what was going on. And I couldn't tell them,
Mm.
but like just the thought would have worked in the mind because my mindset was already down the slippery slope. So
Yeah.
sometimes trying to get help or ask for other people's opinions or even hypothetical, sometimes like you don't even know, like maybe it's not a hypothetical, or maybe it's not just a dream. Maybe there's something going on here below the surface. And sometimes, like, depending on what you say to other people, could end up, hurting them or making them doubt themselves, which, it's not their fault. They didn't know.
Yeah.
Right. And so when you start having these dreams, your dreams are actually trying to help you. But if you don't know how to read dreams, then it's harder to tell. But that's the thing that was a good news for me, because when I figured out my dreams and what they were telling me, at the time I didn't see how I was being helped. I thought I was alone. I thought there was no help. I thought, there was no way out. But
Mm.
my subconscious mind was trying to tell me the whole time. My dreams are trying to tell me, Nova, you need to be yourself. Nova, you need to open your heart. Nova, you need to, and all these things. So I was having dreams, about the shame, the crucifixion. I was having dreams telling me that the spiritual path that I was on, which was, the cult path, it was not for my heart. It wasn't following my heart. I was having dreams that were telling me, about my health, telling me about my spirituality, telling me how I was treating myself, telling me how I needed to to feel more emotions instead of, numbing myself or trying to shut down my emotions because of pain. So my dreams were trying to tell me these things, and it was very interesting, because I would, at the time, I would often pray, before I slept, right? So in a weird way, it was like answering my prayers. And I didn't even realize that because, okay, great, you're helping me, but I don't know how to read dreams. So I'm
Yeah.
having these
What do I
dreams.
do?
Yeah, what do I do? And it's like, and some of these dreams are scary or some of these dreams are weird. And I'm just, and, so that's what's interesting. It's like, fear is an illusion. The illusion part means you can break it. And even though, you may feel like you're alone, there are things happening in your subconscious mind. Your dreams are actually helping you, right?
Mhm. Yeah.
And so when I made these revelations, I was like, I was more like there was so much about me that was there to help me that I didn't even realize, and I
Yeah.
kind of felt bad that I wish I figured it out before the past. But the fact that after the fact, when I figured it out, I was like, oh, that's actually really sweet that my subconscious mind was trying to help me and that I really wasn't alone. I just couldn't use it. I didn't understand it.
Yeah.
Right. Um, so talking about, negative entities, it's like you can sometimes either like see them or you could feel them or you could have dreams about them. Um, or sometimes like for me, I was seeing shadow beings, and that's happened to me like multiple times. And it's kind of awkward because the times that it's happened was when I was in the classroom and I sit at the front of the class, right? And so my teacher's looking at me. And like this happened twice now where they see my eyes looking at something that isn't there and they're looking at me weird, like, what? And it's just, I'm not going to talk about it. It's just like, I got it. Like
Yeah.
they saw me looking at something that wasn't there.
Like cats, right? They're like
Yeah, yeah, and
this.
it was kind of awkward because it's like we don't say anything and we just acknowledge it. It happened really quickly.
Yeah.
So, that's happened to me like twice,
Yeah.
where I see like a really flat shadow figure. And this was around the time I was in high school, right? This was before I graduated. Other times, talking about sensing negative entities or experiencing them or that, we're food for them because of our fear and our shame. Other times I've experienced was besides dreams and besides shadow beings, these were more like humanoid shadow beings. They kind of looked like people, but they weren't necessarily, I guess, like evil. They didn't give me that vibe. It was just like this, okay, there's this weird shadow just like going around the wall and the perfect silhouette of a person, and then it's gone. Right. When I was in these really sad moments because I was crying a lot during those times of low vibration because it felt like there wasn't any hope, right? And there's all
Mhm.
this fear and anxiety. And I actually developed like a little bit of like agoraphobia where I was just afraid to like leave my house.
Yeah.
Um and it wasn't because I was afraid of like not being sheltered. It was because interacting with the world around me, um it didn't feel right. I
Yeah.
didn't feel right, and like when you're that isolated, being around people just makes you feel worse because
Mhm.
then you're reminded of all your thoughts and all the fear and the social
You're like
anxiety.
alone in a crowd, right?
Yeah, exactly. And then like with the embarrassment and the shame, it's kind of like I don't want to exist, like I got nothing to express, I have nothing to feel, I have nothing to give anybody. Um and that's what it really felt like, and but eventually over time with shadow work I had to learn to like overcome the anxiety, and it was really just it's the illusions in my head, and it's also
Yeah.
partly to do with trauma and some other things because I've also had some bullying, which also contributes to our shadows as well. And then it's like at
Mhm.
bullying and then religious stuff and
Well, that's a lot.
and yeah, it's a lot. And then like problems at home, and then um just trying to like find myself as an adult after I graduate. Okay, I went through all
Yeah.
this trauma, what now? Like I'm basically stuck, like, and that's what led into the awakening. But like before the awakening, it's just easy to think that there's nothing important. about you.
That's
There's
right. Yeah.
nothing, there's no reason, you know. And so I was just kind of like holding for days and days and days, and you know, numbing ourselves is something we do to help with the pain, but sometimes it kind of helps us survive in a weird way. It's kind of like the passage of time.
Yeah.
Um, so I was just like watching a lot of TV because it's distracting the mind. You know, I can't be alone with my mind, right? But in
Mhm.
the time where I had to be alone with my mind, um, it was because the fear and the shame and how you feel about yourself, you lose your creativity big time. You're not nice to yourself. There's no compassion. You can't feel anything good because the things that are bothering you are clinging on you so much that you can't enjoy life, right?
Mhm.
And so things that used to be fun are no longer fun anymore, you know? And then you can't be around people and you can't be by yourself. So now you're stuck with your thoughts and you're
Yeah.
stuck with these types of things. And so I would end up um, feeling all these bad feelings about myself and listening to the sad music at the time. And I wasn't allowed to listen to those types of music with like the cuss words or the intensity, or because it was you know, cuss words isn't really a religious like exception, you know, like you can't speak a certain way or listen to certain things because it's bad and it's sinful and things like that. But then I would also feel bad for listening to this music because it wasn't because I wanted to like sin or be bad. It was because this is the only thing that understands how I feel
It
somehow.
understands you. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And it's like, but then the shame part of me, it's like, oh, it doesn't want to be compassionate. You know, it's still bad. So like,
Mm.
you know, why would I feel bad for trying to resonate, try to find something that resonates with me? But that's what shame does. It tells you, no, you shouldn't even do that. Don't even think about it. You're doing
That's right.
something bad, you
Yeah.
know. So like, don't be nice to yourself, right? And
Yeah.
these are the types of music I was listening to, sad music, and I was like in the darkness, and you know, my body was feeling a lot of stress. And it, you know, because you can't express, you can't create, you can't enjoy, you can't be your real self, and now you're alone, and now you're really sad, and and you're scared. So when you like are quiet and you can't relax and you're just like going through your own head, you start to notice thoughts come in and they're not your thoughts, or thoughts come in and they're like, they're just not good good but how do you say it? Things become, I don't know, it's just hard to explain. It's like you just get these ideas, I guess, you
Mhm.
know, but they feel different. You know,
Yeah.
they're
It's a
not,
different energy, and
yeah,
it's not, it doesn't feel like your own, but it's
exactly.
trying to tell you that it is your own.
Yeah,
It's
and
like,
the
no,
with
no,
all
this is
this,
absolutely you. It's like,
yeah,
I'm not so sure, but it feels really bad either way.
yeah, and the thing is that when you get these thoughts, it's because like your emotion is already in a vibration that, you know, with just the right circumstances, you could think that these are your thoughts. You could even like accept them as something you want to do, but it's not really. It's just they're like taking advantage of the fact that, you know, this person's really angry or this person's really sad, you know,
Yeah.
the entities will like put thoughts into your head that makes you feel worse, right? Or even the idea that even if they're not your own thoughts, but the idea that they're somehow convincing to you, or at least at the feeling level, right?
Mhm.
Because then there's the aspect of recognizing, you know, I've could have done some really bad things because of my low vibe, and it wasn't because I wanted to be bad or I wanted to hurt people. It was because like there was only darkness,
Yeah.
right? And but there's also the implication of recognizing, because this is, I'm one of the lucky ones in a sense, because people who are under that much like demonic oppression, like they don't survive, you
Yeah.
know, or they do stuff that, you know, is really awful. It's kind of like this Joker archetype in a way,
Mhm.
you know, where, you know, society doesn't take care of you, doesn't help you, or you can't you can't get healing, you can't get help, and the world around you just feels really closed and isolated, and it's kind of like, we'll just burn it down. It's
Yeah,
kind of like,
that's right.
what's the
It's
point?
constantly rejecting you. Yeah, yeah.
Exactly, and
Because I wanted
yeah,
to sorry to
sorry.
interrupt. Before I forget, I wanted to touch on like the journey you described, and I want to thank you for going into such detail because it's so powerful. Like your journey and your ability to articulate it is stunning. Like it's so hard. It's so hard both for you to go through that journey and then to be able to, not just in this video but in your YouTube channel and your series, talk in such transparency and detail. It's so powerful and so helpful. And it, like, you describe, and the things you describe you've done, like, it includes things like, my beliefs are that our souls choose these paths, they choose these lifetimes, and it's really hard, right? It doesn't take away the fact that you and I and so many people around the world go through such horrific trauma. Doesn't mean that our soul said, yeah, that's a great idea, let's like allow all these horrible things to happen. It's almost like our souls are given the choice, would you like this incarnation to grow? By the way, it includes these sorts of themes and things. And they're like, it's terrifying, but yeah, sure. And but it's not a free will, what's the word, compromise, to say, well, just do whatever you want, like do your worst. Like it's not that, but it's an awareness at a soul level that these things are are likely to happen in this journey. And your soul's choosing it. It's like, I need every pain that I go through, and every shame and fear is one more step in my growth. It's an opportunity for growth. And then you also said, you never said, oh, good news, I just woke up one morning, because I asked someone like on Instagram and they said, hey, you just need to raise your vibe. So I just raised my vibe and spiritually bypassed the whole thing. And now I no longer am attached to any of my negative emotions. And they're like, sorry, what's that? You're like, oh, no, that's the other me. I can't, don't mention the other me. You just constantly describe going through it. Like you everything that you come up against, you're like, I need to face this. Um, and I remember talking to you a few months ago, because this had affected me for several months until just stopped very recently in the last few weeks, which was like my digestive system. I had very like kind of irritable bowel syndrome type symptoms, but and I had like some basic tests done by the doctor, but they'd like, well, maybe you have something, and then the referrals take like months, in the UK at least. Um, but I was like, it's energy first, and it's all in my digestive system is all centered around the solar plexus, and the solar plexus is all about lack. Like that's a big journey for me in this lifetime. Is how do you address the fear states? It's pretty low down. It's not as low as shame, but it's down there on the
Yeah.
frequency spectrum of lack. And often people compensate by greed. Um, and of course, how do you solve lack? It's like it's just mind-boggling, right? Like you literally, like, if you have $1 left and you're worried about losing it, to overcome lack, you have to give it away. You have to give it to someone. Like, why do I
Yes.
do that? That's insane. It's like, no, because it's not the dollar that has the power over you. It's your fear of losing it. So gifting it, you're overcoming, you're facing the fear and saying, even though it's my last dollar, I'll give it to you. I'll give it to you now. And it was like when I left my corporate job, it's like literally the only way to overcome the lack was to resign from my job and say I'm leaving and then actually leave. And I've never felt better. Like, I don't worry about losing my job anymore. Like that's like a huge thing. It was so funny. 2 years I was
Hmm.
worried about losing my job. Um, and I know also that there's also this theme that you're describing, which is these things that happen to you weren't just like randomly somehow disconnected. Like, I don't know, like there was, some predatory, like horrible being wandering around the streets where you live going, I wonder who I'm gonna like destroy next. and then just crept into your home and it was like, oh, here's a good one, and I'll just destroy everything and everything goes crazy. Like, no, like it's absolutely your soul's chosen the journey, and every being, whether they're a human, a plant, a cat, an energetic being, a shadow figure, whatever it is that turns up in your existence, is all part of the same reality, supporting that experience for your soul. And so they all have the part to play, and they're all part of the same creation, all part of the same spectrum. And not all, of course, that this is something that I still, if you picked up in some of my podcasts, like there's still this kind of, what's the word, like is it an oxymoron or something like that, where it's like
Contradiction.
yeah, like how can a demonic entity help you? Like how does that work? Like surely by its very nature it's out to destroy you. And like, oh, okay, but the fact that you even know about it and that it exists at all brings your awareness to the lower vibration that at least those things are real in some realm, and that you don't need to give your power away to these things, but just at very least understanding they exist is a helpful start. And of course, what you go through in your journey, your trauma, like for me, last summer, I I at least I knew, because I've done so much exorcism work and removing entities from people, that I knew that I wasn't under attack from something outside of me. It was an inside job. Like I was being overtaken by my own darkness, and I was pushing every day, like obsessively creating tons of content. I'm losing myself like a ship sailing in circles in some dark void of an ocean, and just going like a busy fool, just burning myself out. And it inside of me, I saw, like, it felt like this dark version of Jon, just this version of me that was just manic and so unhappy and didn't know what to do. And all you'd see on the outside is like happy, high vibe Jon, and then the inside, I was like, that part of me was burning out. Um, and it did, like, and through that shadow, it wasn't a case of like I couldn't just remove it and go, whoops, there goes one of my 9 lives. Although that was to some extent what happened. I had to go through it. I had to stop. I had to face it. I had to, through several days of, well, it was months, but to begin with, just facing that part of me and saying, I love you, Jon. Like I love that part of me is real. Like that was me. There's still a part of me there. That still exists in that space. It's a much smaller part now, but it's still part of my, just like lack. Like I feel like it'll never truly leave me, but it's much smaller now. And I know when it turns up, I can say, my digestive system, strangely enough, as I left my corporate job, as I took through that big step of lack and said, it's okay, I can give up all the money to solve my lack problem. It just almost completely gone away. Like I can like eat what I want, and like I just feel like physically so different, so much lighter. And not that my diet's got worse, really, but it these things, knowing that they're all energy first, and knowing that in this crazy, like chaotic, seemingly fragmented, seemingly disconnected reality, that it's all like your dreams, like it was all part of the same thing. Um, it's all part of this experience to help you grow, and that it's being created for you. It's here to support you, including all the trauma. You're like, oh no, that's terrible news. Like, yeah, no, but it's
Yeah.
true.
Yeah, it's one of those weird things. I've taken a lot of practical, shadow work and understanding myself in my mind, and that's also why I'm really good at understanding it, is because I had to be very like organized, about these my feelings or my thoughts, and it really opened my mind to, this is more than just, life happening to me, for my personal growth and development. But as I was growing myself, I started to see and recognize how things get bigger and bigger, and that it's not necessarily about me. It's like it's about all of us and what we all can contribute. just by being who we are, right? But being who we are is something that we do shadow work, to collect that. And so the biggest blessing we could give to ourselves and to the world is simply be who we are, and as I was figuring out, my problems, and understanding the shadow work and understanding, the psychology behind it. And it's, shadow work is really just Carl Jung psychology. If you want to understand the shadow, the terminology, it's there. I have a more simplified way of looking at it, but it's all related to shadow work. So, and this is the great thing, is that we live in a day and age where you can actively go out and learn how to deal with your problems if you're willing, to go out and deal with your problems. Like,
Yeah.
there's books, on a whole bunch of different topics. There's, and even if there's not books, there's people who are talking about things like we're talking about, that other people can then, I like to believe it's connection first,
Mhm.
like it's easier to listen to the advice of someone you trust and someone who loves you and respects you and gives you that compassion than it is for like just some other type of self-help advice. And
Yeah.
I've learned this, like we need each other, we need connection, we need love, we need to feel safe. And people who feel connected to a person, they can take their advice better, or they can handle it better. But oftentimes when we're in this low vibe and we have problems, sometimes we get advice, but it's not quite there. It's like it's close, but it's not there. And and sometimes like these advice, it feels like oversimplistic, like, okay, it's a nice thing to say, but like, how does this actually help me? Right. And oftentimes we look at the surface when really there's a bigger issue. Right. And that issue that's underneath the surface is a collective shadow, especially here in the West, like where people are emotionally phobic, they're in their heads too much. People can't express how they feel. People have a hard time being who they are. But here's the thing, everybody wants to self-improve,
Yeah.
right? So regardless if you're like religious, if you're non-religious or whatever, everyone wants to improve, right? And if you look at the zodiac sign of Scorpio, right? It's self-help, it's transformation, but it's also magic, it's also alchemy, it's also all these other things, right? And and so when we get into the idea of self-transformation and self-improvement, it is basically in the same line of Scorpio, the eighth house. It's magic, and it's the shadow work, it's the stuff in Scorpio that people don't want to look at. These are the things in Scorpio that get demonized, so like magic, or the occult, or manifestation, but wait a second, that the manifestation is in the same label as transformation,
Yeah.
which is basically being who you are, being your authentic self, and that's how you transform who you are. So when we are doing shadow work, this is what we're doing. But if we're all emotionally phobic, if we're all stuck in our heads, if we're not looking at the darkness, and if we're not talking about it either, then we can't really grow, like in a personal life, but as a collective. So when I see, self-help, I see different aspects of it where a lot of self-help gets mixed into spirituality, or it's like super watered down spirituality because they can't make it to spirituality because they have to market it, and they can't say the real stuff, the shadow work stuff, because
Yeah.
then that doesn't get a lot of views, doesn't get a lot of clicks, because you can't market to someone, hey, all this stuff that you're scared of, here, buy it. Like, look
Yeah.
at this. Like, they're not going to do that,
Oh, I
you
love
know?
that. Like the course you're about to join us on, the higher self foundational training. I remember the first time I ran it, I think it's week 4. Is that right? Week 3 or 4 is shadow
Yeah.
work. And I
Yeah.
always thought no one would come to it. I always thought about the week that everyone tries to skip. But I think it's the week everyone turns up. Because it's this feeling, right? Like your soul's like, but I think I need to go. And you're like, do I have to? Um, and what I love about shadow work is sharing it, right? Like
Mhm.
share a shadow or share a shadow for a day. And like what we do in the course is we share it. I get to do it too. Yay. I get to like share a shadow every day for a week. And just one thing, we put it in the group chat and we just share what it is. it is so liberating.
Yeah.
I think one of the big things about it is like without, I don't know what it is about us humans, but we always want to solve everything, right? We're always like, there's a problem, I must solve it. It's like, no, no, it's okay. There's more problems than you'll ever be able to solve. And there's some problems here that maybe you just at least need to start by seeing. Because once you see it, it's like your kind of torch of consciousness shines on this light, shines on this shadow, this darkness. Um, so if I was to share one today, it would be, I don't know, like I find we have a camper van that's 6 meters long, and I find it, my shadow is like I get scared of trying to park it in parking car parks, parking lots. And my son's always like, he's always laughing at me. He's like, and so it begins. He always says that whenever we enter a car park. And now we always like we talk about it as a family. Like we say, "Oh, look," and I'll make jokes like, even though there's tons of spaces, I'll say, "I bet I'm still scared to find like I'll still get nervous about it hanging over the edge of the lines. Maybe I'll get fined or whatever." And so we're just drawing attention to it, and I know that still there's a bit more shadow for me in there to find out like why am I really worried about it? A lot of it's like coupled with like this kind of programmed version of me that's scared of annoying other people with my large vehicle, but it's the only thing I have now. I sold my car. And there's more to discover in that shadow. But just by sharing it, the fear's kind of gone. And I know that it's a relatively small shadow to solve, but just bringing attention to it is such a huge thing. And if someone's watching this, and if you have any kind of shadow, no matter how big and ugly and horrible it is, if you can just share it, like try talking out loud, talk to a mirror, write it down, tell someone, even better, tell someone, and hear yourself saying it, hear yourself telling like the whole truth about it, and how it makes you feel, like how that shadow makes you feel, because it might seem so silly to you. It might seem like you're trying to park a vehicle, or it might seem like something horrific that's happened in your life, and you just don't want to do specific things or even go back to that trauma. And to know that it's a huge relief and release for you if you can do that, um and just to like give that experience your love. That's a huge part of shadow work, is just being able to see it and then feel it. And I feel like if that's all you can do, that's, and for many people that's more than enough. Like if this whole world could just take that first step together, like everyone in the world right now, almost all our problems would be solved.
Yeah. There's a lot of truth in that, John, sharing um something what I would do when I was a lot younger, going through I guess you could call it a dark night of the soul. And I suppose it's that's correct. Um I would journal a lot, to try to like get my thoughts out of my head, because like when you're not expressing, they're just there, and it's kind of like a fly that's just all around your head, and it's just annoying. So I would like have to write things down about like how I feel, and even just releasing emotion as I'm writing it, it was helpful, it was therapeutic, but especially, like if I didn't have anyone in my reality, to share to, that was a useful thing, trying to find healthy ways of expressing, even if it's just pain, can help alleviate some of the pressure. Um, Another thing I wanted to talk about, and I kind of forgot, but I'm gonna remember it. As you were talking about like sharing our shadows, right? Okay, yes, I remember now. Some of the practical things like that I've learned, is, in my shadow work series on my channel, I talk about things. What is judgment? People get confused with dualities, right? And so when we have like an incomplete, perspective or judgment on one label and its opposite, what ends up happening is that we don't get the healthy or true side of either label, right? So people
Mhm.
confuse judgment and caution. They think, well, I have to judge because I don't want to get hurt. I don't want to do this. But like, you can be cautious, but you don't have to judge it. Like, it's a different vibration,
Mhm.
right? And people need to understand, like, what is judgment? Like,
Yeah.
because if we because that's the thing. It's like, well, if we're going to talk about shadows and not judging our shadows, then that begs the question, what is judgment? If we're going to talk about fear, what is fear? If we're going to talk about shame, what is it? Like, we feel this, but we don't understand it. And that contributes to us being stuck in the illusion of fear. So, understanding ourselves and even just sharing what we've gone through, that's a form of self-compassion. And that's
Mm.
something people tend to, we forget to be compassionate on ourselves when we're going through such a hard time. But when you're actually taking the effort and you're willing to, even if it still hurts, or even if you don't have your answers right away, even if you don't have your solutions right away, trying to take an active role and step in understanding, there's other people who've dealt with shame. There's people, they're therapists, or they write books, or they talk about these types of things. Shadow work is a form of therapy, if you
Yeah.
think about it,
Yeah. Absolutely.
and exactly. And if we're not like looking at the issues and we're trying to help ourselves, but we're not facing the issue, you're not really like doing much. You're just kind of dancing around it and convincing yourself that you're working on yourself when you're not. And it's one of those things where shadow work is its own label, right? But in my exploration of shadow work, there's all these different sub labels that aren't really considered shadow work, right? But it's basically shadow work. Carl Jung talks about the shadow. That's where the term the shadow came from. He created
Yeah.
that term. You know, we're talking about, people afraid of sharing their emotions or feeling their emotions. There's books on, it's called emotional immaturity. You're trying to understand, how to be less judgmental. There's people who understand it. There's people that can help change your perception. And that's the first step, but it's also a humility in a weird sense. Like, we
Yeah.
kind of get, like, even though there's shame, it's not necessarily like a pride, it's more like an ego where you're kind of thinking, no, this is shame and this is all it will ever be. But then when you take your darkness into your light, you realize that because you've been through this shame and you've overcome it, your light is so much stronger. So that way, when shame happens again, no one's going to take away, your light, and you're not going to do that to yourself, right? That
Yeah.
that's what it does. It makes you a stronger light. Like, there's
Mhm.
the phrase, you're only as strong as your weakest shadow, right?
Yeah. That's true.
Yeah,
Yeah. I
exactly.
think, I think judgment, I didn't really get judgment for most of my life. And I understand it now, or at least have, a largely complete operational version of my belief system for judgment. And I feel that when we die, and from the moment we're born to when we die, and then afterwards, when we decide to reincarnate again or return back into the source of this universe, or whatever, belief system people have, only we judge ourselves. So we go through this like end of life kind of review type thing. We go, oh, hey John, how did that go? And like have a chat with my soul. We see what we did to others and how that makes us feel, and get a sense of how it felt for them being on the receiving end of what we did. There's no like third party involved, right? Which is kind of shocking to that was kind of shocking to my belief system, right? Because even without going into the spiritual side, I still, until that point, until just a few years ago, believed that other people could judge me, and that their judgment of me was directly influenced my how I feel about myself. So if I said, if I went on, oh God, I've done such crazy things since then. But if I went on, Facebook, where all my middle-aged friends or ex-friends were, and I would say, I'm going to start like talking like a dragon, and like in a song, and like do really crazy things, really out there things, I would initially that I was judged, and I felt really judged. And so when they said, John, that's weird, I would judge myself and say, John, that behavior is weird. And it's quite funny because now I'm like, I know, it's great. It's so weird. Um, and like one of the things I do, one of the practices I do is that when someone says to me a judgment, I go, that's a judgment. Like I just say it in my head. It's like, they just judge something. And then I listen to myself. I try and catch myself all the time. Like, is that thing I just said a judgment? You know, is like, if you look out the window and you say the weather's bad, like, well, what for who? Like, the rain's good for like plants and stuff. Like, what do you mean by bad? Or if you don't want to go to something because you want it to be rained off, maybe it's good. Like, they're
Yeah.
just judgments. They're just a human reaction to, you know, an observation and an experience. And you're just putting a label against it and you're saying, well, I think it's this, or a combination of these things. And that's also super fascinating when you think of, when we're talking about like, you know, the metaphysical side of the universe, and there's these different negative entities out there, and they're doing like bad stuff to other beings, including ourselves. But who are you to judge them? Like, and I remember when I first started removing, like, my kind of first experiences were removing like negative energy. I saw it like it's kind of dark spots on when I go into meditation with clients, and then I'd see like these dark patches on their chakras, their like energy centers, and I would remove them. Um, and as I started to gain more clarity about what I was seeing, I'd see like, to begin with, like little kind of like leeches or worms, like just these small like little beings, attachments, people, and they would feed off the very things that we were talking about. Like, got a fear? That's great news. I'll just like, does that hurt you in the heart? Oh, I'll feed off that. So this little thing would be like a leech, like, sorry for the noise, but like sucking that energy from you. And whenever like things were, whenever you weren't in that state, it would provoke you into feeling again. Like, what about that thing? And like, oh yeah, that thing. And it like yum yum yum. It would like feed again. Um, Now the very act of me being asked by a client to come and take a look, like, you take your car into a garage because you hear a rattle, like, just when just the act of bringing awareness to it, suddenly it falls into this realm of what we're talking about, shadow work. But it's not that you need to judge that thing and go, oh no. It's like, that's awful, like you must remove it immediately, like you probably should, but it's not the worst thing in the universe, right? And and then when I started doing these things, my belief system started to really quickly change, because I it's so common now, whenever I move something from someone, that it says something to me afterwards, or the guide or the archangel that I'm working with like relays a message, and it it's like, it melts your heart when you hear these things. Because so a common one would be, I just did a session before we came on today, um and the this attachment that someone had was actually, like a loved one from many lifetimes ago, that had waited in a kind of like semi-living state for thousands of years, and had turned very low vibration because they were protecting the client from this fragment of themselves until they're ready to reintegrate it. And so what now, like I saw it, and it's like, well, it looks like a demon. And as I started to take a closer look, you realize its history, and it's like, it didn't start like that. It started as a loved one, and its love for you, although that has turned bad and is working against you now, the whole journey that that being's gone through is self-sacrifice for you. Like, how do you feel about that? And it's like, you think you've got it hard. This being, although it's horrible now, it just took like a huge leap of faith to help you. And and it that I think that really helps me with judgment as well, because for all those times that I go through those difficult challenges, whether it's something, it's easy and when in a shame mentality to think that it's happening to you, against you. But when you just draw yourself out of that and feel, actually it's happening for me, like, why, what's the bigger lesson, why is this happening to me? Often the answers are just so beautiful. Like, if I hadn't lost myself a year ago, there's no way I could have made it this far. I couldn't have. I just probably given up. I'd probably, I don't know, start drinking alcohol again and just like numb myself, and stay in a career that I could kind of box myself in and feel apparently safe.
Mhm.
And so by facing those fears and facing those shadows, releasing that judgment of that part of me that I wanted to hide for so long, um, and learn to love the whole of myself, that that helped me the most. And yeah, I just think, you know, we have enough problems without judging ourselves and creating this poisonous self-talk, like every day looking in the mirror, oh, I look so old, and like, or every time I turn on my phone and it goes like my son calls it like old man mode, when it like it's in selfie mode, it's like, ah, who's the old guy? And it's like, it's okay, like you've got to love every part of yourself, and not judge, and just at least allow yourself a little bit of grace for a few seconds
Oh,
and go,
yes.
it's a judgment, it's okay.
Yes, yes, yes. My shadow work series, I go into depth as to like what judgment is, and I shared in that video when I discovered what judgment actually was. Like I knew the word, but I didn't really understand it, and it was just being like critical, being overly critical. And I had to like self-reflect, and to me, my judgments at the time, I don't think I was being critical, but then I realized I was being critical, but I didn't realize it until I figured out like judgment and like its opposite, where
Mm,
like our sometimes our limiting beliefs, they're ingrained into us into thinking this is moral, this is correct, right? When it's actually judgment, right?
yeah, that's right.
And so you're using that as an excuse to be overly critical. And so you think, no, I'm not being critical. This is just the reality, you know?
Yeah.
And it's just a really harsh lack of compassion thing. And this is what I noticed a lot in shadow projection, is that sometimes it's not necessarily, like someone's trying to like hurt you intentionally. And that's another thing. Sometimes we have to, think of other possibilities, that not everybody who hurts us is intending to hurt us, or not everyone, is like that. And oftentimes when we think those thoughts, then that makes us feel bad, and they
Yeah,
might not even be true. And then we feel bad for nothing,
that's right.
and
Yeah,
exactly. And we have ourselves convinced of something like
it's
that. So, oh
it's
yeah.
funny as well, because you would say, you could say, judgy is often used as like a derogatory term towards someone. It's so funny, right? Because and yet we're doing it all the time to each other, and ourselves in particular. And if you just caught someone, if someone says, hey, your behavior is weird, John, if you just said that's really judgy, I mean, which is a judgment in itself, ironically. But it's really funny, because judgment often we think of, like, associated with like courts of law, and somehow they're perfect systems. And I am super intrigued to learn more about how, other civilizations and other planets deal with law and, um, prisons, and like what do they do. But in our you're absolutely right, like in our programming, um, we're so used to this kind of normalized version of what's okay and what's not okay, and that anything that falls outside of that is a judgment. And then we also have like these past lives and other aspects, other experiences in our own life, that kind of gives us this kind of triggering reaction to it. So when someone says, still, when they say it to me, hey John, that's weird, I just remember myself being burnt at the stake as a witch. And I'm like, here we go again, John. And it's ironic. So I just released an album called She's So Psychic, with a picture of me as a witch on the front. And I'm like, got to get through it, John. Like, you can't go around this. Like, you have to like be the witch again, and just share those things that you get judged by. My son loves to, like, he's always hated from a young age. He's 14 now, but he always hated being normal. Like, he thought it was the most ridiculous thing. It's always gone against his belief systems, any kind of normalization of humans. He just thinks that, like, losing what's unique about you is totally insane. And um and we and we even like did a song together many years ago. I think it was quite young, called "Who Wants to Be Normal." And it and I love that, because it's all about what this universe is about, right? That exploration of what's different about us, and celebrating everything that's different. And we're in today's society, we're creating more and more labels about the differences in each other and trying to build like an ever increasing granularity of labels and differences. But I do genuinely feel like diversity of thought and personality beyond anything physical about us is, and our energy is so important to celebrate. And I love that, like my son's philosophy is that, like, if you can just find those things that are different about you and celebrate them and share what they are, and it doesn't matter how ridiculous they kind of seem, like, I don't know, like I seemed today, I was pretty good at spotting when it was about to rain, like a couple of hours ahead of when it did rain. I'm not a weatherman, but it was like, that's the kind of a superpower I'd like to have. I'd like to know when it's about to rain. Um, Everyone's got their unique abilities and differences, and celebrating those helps us break away out of judgment.
Yes, it all goes down to that inner critic, and what I found, especially practical for shadow work, is question the judgment. When we are describing something, it's like, well, what is it? Because we're using these loose terms to label ourselves or to label a thing. But here's the thing: if we're going to understand and utilize non-dualism, non-duality, then there is no judgment present, like in non-dualism, in the sense where you separate and divide because it's all one, right? So basically, we have to recognize that these labels and these things that we don't question, that we use to hurt ourselves, when we actually try to see beyond, you know, there's the word and then there's the vibe, of the word, right? Sometimes, like for instance, someone could say something, but the way they say it, it's different than how another person would say it,
Yeah.
and that's because they might say the same thing, but one person is saying it with more compassion, the other person is maybe not with compassion, right? And this is the thing, this is the problem. Our whole human cognition and language is dualistic, right?
Mm,
So we basically understand things in terms of duality. But the thing is that if we don't understand how our minds operate and how they function, that's our whole language and cognition. So when we think thoughts, we're thinking thoughts with that language and cognition, and we don't understand how we utilize duality and labels and words. Like, we have to recognize and question, like, what is this thing? What is
yeah.
non-dualism? What is these labels? And if we are going to look in things in a non-duality, these things that are seemingly different are actually the same. But it's an inner alchemy thing, because we're also recognizing, not to judge judgment, not to judge the darkness and these things, but also recognizing, like, where, like you said, it's happening for you, right? It's not
Mm,
happening to you, because when you see it as happening for you, then you see the circle, right? And if you
yeah.
think it's happening to you, then, like, you divide that circle, and you divide that in all that many different ways, right?
Yeah.
So
I
just, yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say, I caught myself today. I was about to release my album She's So Psychic, with a picture of me as a witch on the front, on the album cover, and I was about to post it onto Instagram. It says, would you like to post to Facebook too? And I was like, it's like, I literally stopped for a minute. It's like, John, what's the fear here? Like, what? Like, you're going to all this trouble. It's clearly meaningful for me to do it. um and then it's thinking, well, I don't know, I've got this business I'm building, and I don't know, maybe like my reflexology clients wouldn't like love seeing a picture of their reflexologist as a witch on an album cover, and like, how do those things even fit together? And then I was thinking, but what about all the people that just need to see John being strange, weird, like just being himself? Like,
Yeah.
I'm Jon Binnie, and I self-identify as a witch. Like it's a big thing for many people. And so I like clicked it back and said, yes, share it to Facebook. And then it's like, oh, maybe I could like share it to Facebook and then go in and edit some of the pictures that, were a bit strange. Like, oh, I can't really be bothered doing that. I'll just leave it. And and it and so I did share it. And I was just like, I was really just catching myself and saying, am I not doing this because I'm scared? And I was like, and of course, like, your mind's like, no, 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 no. You're not scared, John. It's just some other reason. And that other reason is perfectly acceptable. It's like, hang on. I think the vibe of that is actually fear. Like, it's not like, what am I really trying to do? I'm getting the honor of living a life that so many people crave for, and I crave for years, and now I'm going to limit myself. Like now that I'm free, like that's insane, John. And I'm like, okay. Um, so I think like asking yourself like the reason you're not doing something because you're scared, then just face the fear. Because time and time again, I learned that just like leaving my corporate job, right on the other side of that door of fear is my literally my dream life. Like literally just resign, step through, dream life. Like it was just as easy as that. And
Yeah.
if the emotions, of course, took me 2 years to build up the courage, but it's like, and I know that the timing was important. I know I had to build up to it, and I don't want to like oversimplify it or belittle it, but it's like that fear was so intense that it had to be a really cool thing on the other side of the door of that fear. It's like there'll always be that kind of darkness, that demon standing in front of your door, blocking you because you have to go through it. You can't just go, well, I'll just go and find another door. I'll just go and find a lesser happy life. I'll just go and compromise on something. Like you'll live a life of misery. And yeah, I think that's always a good test as well in your shadow work, is to say, okay, what is this fear, and where does that come from? Like, what's the big lesson
Yes.
I'm learning here?
Yes. That's asking questions shows that you're interested in growing and learning, right? Um, and this is the interesting part, is that when you're in a really low vibration of shame, it also at times it creates another ego identity of victim mentality. Um, and that is a very difficult shadow to go through. And
Mm-hmm.
um, you know, I've taken more responsibility, especially, because when you got shadows, you can feel like a victim of your shadows. When you got a hard life, you feel like a victim. And I don't mean victim in a judgmental way, but I mean victim in the terms of you inhibit your ability to grow, um, because you're so wrapped up in the unfairness of everything. You're like it pulls you down,
Mm-hmm.
and it's an important thing, like you have to be willing, that even though maybe this is how I've seen myself, from a very young age, and judgments are very much the same as complaining often, so you complain
Yeah.
a lot, you're making judgments, and you're not having a very happy life because you're not grateful, and then, and at the time when you're feeling all this negativity, it's like, well, this is unfortunate, this is bad, and why did I have to deal with this growing up, and I didn't deserve this, and things like that. And, oftentimes, it's not always that we're complaining because we want to be judgmental. I've noticed that when we share our problems, some of us are trying to find comfort, right? But there's a different vibe, Other
Yeah.
times it's like you're complaining, right? But maybe, a friend will listen to you and then say, I understand, or say you don't need to be afraid, or like I get it. Or a friend will like help you see things in a positive way, but
Mm-hmm.
sometimes we complain as convincing ourselves like there's no way to improve. There's no way to fix things. Like these problems are just too much
Yeah.
at times, but there's not to oversimplify it, but when we have friends, when we have people we can trust, what I'm trying to lead up here is people's lack of emotional maturity is what causes a lot of the pain that
Mm-hmm.
that we have when we're trying to share who we are, and we're trying to connect emotionally. And the limiting beliefs very often start at a young age, or they start, in whatever type of way. People think of cults as maybe a Hollywood scary thing, or sometimes they'll look at religion, but when we really look at it, cults, it's their limitations. They're full of judgments. It's how they control you. And if you look
Mm-hmm.
at all the ways our limiting beliefs control our lives, our limiting beliefs come from many institutions, from
Yeah.
many
Oh
cultures.
yeah.
Yeah, and, and when we're our youngest, we're our most authentic. We're just chilling,
Yeah,
as little kids, but then we grow up and we have parents or we have a society that doesn't care about how we feel. It was one
yeah,
of the things I had to learn growing up in school when, when you get bullied and you realize no one cares, or no one helps you, or there's no help, or you try to talk to your family or your parents, and, a lot of society is very overly masculine, in
mhm,
terms of energy. And so things for emotion and reflection and connection are not really a thing. School, like society is very much in this yang energy. But like when we're children, like we're all emotions.
yeah, that's right.
We only think
Yeah,
about in terms of how we feel. And when we go to our parents, they're supposed to teach us how to regulate our emotions, and how to how to have a healthy sense of self-esteem and all these types of things, right? And what's happening is that the parents also need their shadow work to help with their own.
that's
And
right.
so
Yeah,
when you have children
yeah,
and you start judging your children, and you don't always recognize at times like how you're doing that, and
mhm,
and talking about emotional immaturity, it's something that's really helped me understand and navigate the world around me, because I've always felt, growing up bad for being sensitive, because
mm,
being sensitive, it's a feminine, trait in terms of energy. Sensitivity isn't really valued in at least the society that the way I grew up. It's not really a thing. And to me, it was more like a weakness,
yeah,
and the reality was that my sensitivity was because of how much I'm willing to feel and how much I want to connect, and how I show up, in the world, and how I feel things very deeply, right? And the issue of me feeling so like displaced is because I'm surrounded by a bunch of other people who aren't sensitive, and I don't mean sensitive, like weakness, but I mean like sensitive in terms of what they're willing to feel. And if they're
yeah,
willing to self-reflect, it's,
yeah,
and there's not a lot of people like this, because to work a job and to have all these responsibilities, the masculine energy, it gets things done,
yeah.
right? And a lot of people do not want to take the time to deal with their emotions. They
That's
don't
true.
want to take the time to, and especially when you got a kid, because when you have a kid, that kid is going crazy, feeling emotions that are really intense. And it's not they're trying to be manipulative, and it's not that they're evil children. It's just that they don't know how to do that. But even adults do the same thing, but they act out in different ways,
That's
and
right.
that's the shadow work, right?
It's true.
Um,
Well, and
and
I
I
when
Yeah.
when you were talking about constraints and when we were children, I just after I left my corporate job, like in the few days afterwards, I said to my wife and family, I said, I'm going to go in our camper van. I'll take our dog and I'm going to go away for a few days. And it's like a kind of vision quest. And I just described it as that. And to me, a vision quest is going on a journey. And it's a physical journey often, but it's inward. So you're going somewhere to find something else, something about yourself. And the fun thing is, you don't know the question, you also don't know the answer, but you do know you need to do it. You're going to find the question on the way, and you're also going to find the answer to that question. So away I went, and I started. I felt guided to go and visit my clients, so I started driving up through Edinburgh, and then as a kid I moved around the country quite a lot. But one of the first places I lived was in Dollar, almost dead on central Scotland. And so I drove up there and parked up for the night, up next to a beautiful castle, really magical place, just me and my dog. And I remember sitting there in the camper van and I was like, I think I feel the questions coming on. And it's like, the question was, who was I before I started my programming, being programmed? Like, and I say that like programming myself into society and then being programmed by others. And so when I lived there, I was only like three and between, I think age maybe two, three, and four. I think I left when I was five. And in Scotland, you go to like kind of nursery, like preschool at four, and then into school at five. And um, I remember like feeling that age, like And I was like, there's this John that was like 4 years old. And I remember saying things like, I'm going to be a spaceman, and I totally believed it. It's like, because people would say to you, what do you want to be? It's like, well, space looks amazing. I'm going to be a spaceman. Or if not that, a firefighter. Or yeah, or maybe a mechanic. I'll choose when I'm older. Um, it was before computers had turned up, but it was like, for me, not only was it totally viable because I had my whole life ahead of me to study in one of these things, but the energy just felt right because people would ask, "What do you want to do?" And you just give them an answer like, "Well, it's my life. I get to choose, so I'll just choose these things." And then the programming began, right? And it was like this serious layer after layers, like these bricks, like stacked on my shoulders. Like, oh, John, like you're going to have to learn to ride a bike without stabilizers, but don't ask anyone for help. Like, we're just too busy to help you. Like, oh, this is hard. And then like, don't, when you go to school, don't talk about shadow figures. Okay, don't talk about the shadow figures. And they're not real. Okay, they're not real. And like this, one thing after the other. And it, the answer that I felt was like, oh, okay. So the answer to my question of what I'm meant to be doing now that I've left this corporate job, is I'm deprogramming myself. I left the thing, this what was a lot longer than 26 years
Yeah.
of programming, and now I'm leaving that. And it made me see, like, almost like from birth to now, that journey. And you're absolutely right. Like, it is, I know now I am still very programmed. Like, I feel it. Like, I feel like that whole Facebook thing of posting, a picture of me being a witch. It's like, that's a program somewhere. Like, don't be weird. Don't like annoy your customers. You'll lose money, or or at some point you're gonna be, you know, chased out of the village with pitchforks and torches. And it's, I do feel like these journeys for us to go on, like, I think that's a fantastic advice, Nova, when you're saying, like, just ask questions, like, just question everything. Like, it's
Yeah.
really, really healthy.
It is.
um and it helps erode the magic that are baked into the words themselves, and the tones that people put behind it, like, that's weird, woohoo, or
Mhm.
like, that's weird. They're totally different
Yeah.
frequencies. And when you question them, you realize, oh, there's an answer in this. And it's, sometimes it's a reflection in you, sometimes it's a reflection of the other person that's saying it to you,
Yeah.
sometimes it's a blend of the two. And
Yeah.
it's always happening for you.
Yeah. Um, and the reason why I was talking about emotional maturity is because those are the people that can handle those who are more sensitive, And I've been, very practical. I've been learning about this type of shadow work, you could call it. And it was about, I forgot the title of the book exactly, but it's about emotionally immature parents, right? And I started to learn about how society has changed, the culture of how we raise children, and how, you know the way that before there was books on how to raise children, people raise their children with religion. And then that's where we get the idea of, spare the rod and spoil the child. Like, that's where people got the idea to hit their children to make them obey. And when we look at oftentimes the parts of, the negative parts of religion that are very controlling, it's like there's this other program that goes into the adults, that goes into the children. And then as children, when we receive, the backlash of it, when we grow up a certain way, we grow up with these insecurities or these programs, but like we're kids, right? And there's a whole program with the way children see the world and how the way they see parents. It
Mhm.
was so important to me. And as I was reading this, I was making a connection between, myself and the way, I saw God at the time, in religion. And like, this was what young Nova thought about God. And then this is what the cult did to me. And this is how they made me feel about it. And this is how it like separated me even more so, because I
Mhm.
did grow up with emotionally immature parents, but then having a religious, figure of God at the time, also having similar traits of emotional immaturity, or having these judgmental things, you really got to understand, like, when we take away the religion, we take away beliefs, but just look at the way children need to be raised and the way they need to be loved. That is the way we were meant to live life.
Mhm.
And people need to understand, like, we're really just children. We're just in bigger bodies, and that we still need the same amount of love, and we still need these things, right? And as I was reading this book and I was understanding, okay, if I'm not close to my parents and my parents are emotionally immature, I can't get close to anybody who's emotionally immature. Those people aren't going to be my friends. And then when they're my, when my parental figures, how does that relationship to young Nova, how does she grow up with parents who are emotionally immature? How does she see herself? How does she handle problems in the world? What about her self-esteem and these types of things? How does this affect it? It affects so much of us, right? And
Yeah.
and that's the thing, there's like this fantasy of us when we're children, wishing that we could just be who we are. We could just be accepted, we could just be loved. These expectations on, I wish, my parents would be more supportive of my tarot, or I wish that I could talk to my parents and tell them everything that I've been through and what I've gone through in my dark night of the soul, but I can't, you know?
Yeah.
And maybe we don't think about, these things that hurt us, but because I'm looking so far back into my development and how I see myself and how I was programmed, and the way things, how they could have been if they were healthier, I start to see myself in a different way. And I see myself and other people with more compassion. And the best part is when you question things, you become more confident, because if anyone's trying to come to you with this negative energy of judgment, and they're judging that which they don't understand, well, guess what, you're not going to be affected, because you do understand. And it's because you understand is because you're not judgmental, and because you're not judgmental, you have compassion, not only for yourself but even for those who are judging, because you were once them, right?
Yeah.
At one
So
point,
true.
and we've all done it. Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's the idea of like sharing ourselves and being authentic to other people, not worrying what they think. I think it's a great thing, but we also have to be more careful, or more, cautious, I suppose, with, because sometimes not everyone is meant for our real self. And even
Yeah.
though it's a really positive thing to be who you are, it's great, but also being who you are can help bring in those people who are meant to be with you. But just like I couldn't express myself
Mhm.
in the school, right? Because there wasn't any help for me. Like I couldn't have. There was no way, there was no compassion from anybody, there was no help from anybody. And because I was so, damaged and hurt, at a certain point, I didn't necessarily need to be shown how things were bad. Um I already saw the world this way. I embodied it that way,
Mhm.
and that changes your mind, it changes your attitude, it even changes your actions, right?
Yeah.
And that this is the crazy thing, is like growing up and wanting mercy, wanting compassion, wanting someone to like actually not judge me, but actually just help me grow, because I didn't get to grow up. I went through the system. I went through emotionally immature parents, because that's the way the culture made boomer parents to be often. And then I go through this school, and the school has this type of programming and this paradigm, and then I go through religion, and then this has this and that programming, and then by the
Yeah.
time I'm grown up, it's like 18 years have passed. I'm like, but how did I develop as a person? how
Mhm.
how how did I have friends? I didn't have any friends. I'm not close to my family. I don't know what I want to be. It's like by the time I grow up, it's like, who am I? And
Yeah.
instead of figuring out who I am, I get all these massive shadows that I don't know how to deal with.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, and this was the part of my awakening. It's like, well, who am I? And what do I want to believe? And how do I want to grow?
Yeah.
And I mentioned this because I know a lot of people in the spiritual community, like, there's often like, we're kind of weird, to people who don't get it, right? But by understanding and questioning what is weird, you get more confidence. And if anyone wants to, you know, project their lack of knowledge and make a judgment out of it, it's like, well, you can explain it, and you can educate, and you won't feel bad about it,
Yeah.
and it'll
Yeah.
be fine. And it's just sometimes there's a part of us that expresses things that maybe we don't know how to explain, and because we don't know how to explain it, then other people's criticism makes us feel small, but sometimes understanding things can help us empower us more, but there's also the other part of it where you're doing things and you can't explain them, but you're also knowing that you're expressing who you are. And that's like the other leap of faith shadow work, where it's like, I don't know what I'm doing and I can't explain it, but this is where I am. This is where I'm going. This was like how I felt during my awakening. It's like I can't really explain it. I can't really talk about it. I can't really do much with it, but I'm going to try and try to get somewhere else. Try
Yeah.
to you know, just try, and see what happens. Cause like the way I was and the way I was programmed, the way I was thinking, if I stayed exactly the same, I would have a very predictable future. It would look
Yeah.
the same way it did growing up, and I can't have that. So I have to take a leap of faith and get into something that I don't know that much of,
Yeah.
and it's very scary because the world just like terrified me. And then it's like I'm gonna have to somehow figure it out. And
Yeah.
I don't know, you know.
And
Um
you I feel like what you're describing, like that journey of being alone, um is it's like this kind of lone wolf hero's journey that we go through. I felt
yeah.
like that for years. Still part of me feels a bit like that. Sometimes is it first of all just really worth acknowledging because someone's watching this and they've stayed with us first of all this far. Like, thank you. Well done. But also like it's it can feel like you've made it maybe you have made it past the stage of where you feel like this whole universe is an empty void of nothingness, nothing but pain perhaps, and you've started to see a bit of light, and you're starting to like nurture that light. It's like it's a star in my night sky and I think it's me. It's like part of me and I need to grow it, and if I grow it then I'll start to shine brighter, and it's me. I'll feel more me. And as you grow it, it's hard to connect with other people because so many times when you reach out you go, oh, like I saw an alien spaceship last night, and people are like, what? Like, and then you're like, oh no, why did I say that? They're gonna think I'm so strange now, and maybe I'll never talk to them again, or vice versa. And yet every experience that we go through, because it's happening for us, you realize that um there's this pattern where we do these things once and then we're asked to teach them, right? And like,
Mhm.
what? Like, so literally what you're describing in your journey, Nova, it's lightly that you're being asked now um to go and help others
Mhm.
who've just literally gone. So and you're literally just like, just got to the other side. It's like, yes, like I did it. And then it's like, okay, great. There's all these other people. They need your help too. And it's a huge responsibility, but a huge opportunity. And I was just remembering what you were saying earlier. You said, like, who are you going to call? It's like, if someone phones up and say, hello, and they're like, oh yeah, hi, this is Jon Binnie Exorcism Services. How can I help? And they're like, oh yeah, I've got like this thing in my garden. Can you get rid of it? Yeah, sure. Like, I'll just come over after this, and just let me know if you need anything else. And that's it. Like, imagine a normalized world where these things were like getting your car fixed. Like if mechanics were seen as magicians, where there's a somehow belief system that cars didn't have engines, they had like hearts or something, and the only wizards like of mechanics could go in and like fix them. No one would want to talk about it, right? And they'd like kind of like separate mechanics from the rest of the world, and like this, like it's just as real as dealing with ghosts and all these other things in our lives. And I must admit, there's part of me that thinks like I kind of always still enjoy, maybe it's the darker side of me that enjoys the mystery and the magic behind the fact that not everyone wants to talk about these things, and that some people, I do believe that people that are insensitive and are shut down, and a lot of the time they are quite safe, like because they're kind of like a kind of little walking castle. They're like they don't believe in these things, and so they're not real for them, and their vibration's not interested in it. but they just need to be careful, because if they stumble and fall, or they take lots of drugs or alcohol, or if they go through a dark patch, suddenly they open themselves up, and it's like a feeding frenzy.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I feel like not everyone needs to engage with all of these aspects of the universe, just like I'm sure there's many I don't know about that I don't engage with yet. And um, I feel that sensitivity, because I do remember past lives of where sensitivity was like goals. It was like, you're like, a child was born sensitive. It's like, look at this child, like, behold the sensitivity. Like, they could, hear a human heart on the other side of the planet. It's like, that's it. Like, this is the future of the human race. Um, and although we're kind of the opposite at the moment, I feel like more and more people that are opening themselves up metaphysically will see the sensitivity is like it takes a huge amount of time and effort and practice and rigor. Like, it becomes a currency, your vibration and your sensitivity to vibration. And I don't know how many times you've been told, but I've certainly been told many times, like, John, you're being too sensitive. And now I'm like, now if someone says that, it's like, yes.
Yeah.
That's great news.
Yeah, I've been like gaslit for my sensitivity as a weakness or as a problem, and I just, and that's something that's made it very hard for me um to function in society, and it was always like, well, you have to be insensitive, or you have to stop being so sensitive, otherwise you can't survive. So then growing up being told like I'm not able to survive made me feel worse for being sensitive. And then, and just seeing it as the reality, or the seemingly it's the reality. It was not that, it wasn't a positive advice. Well, you need to stop, otherwise you
Mm,
can't survive. It could have been something like, well, you just have to find your own way. That would have been encouraging. But instead, I get told all this fear mongering stuff, and I'm just a young kid, and I have a whole life ahead of me, and people are already talking to me about things like, what if your parents die? And you don't have a job, or what, like all these things. I'm like, I don't need to think about that. I'm, it's I get all this pressure, to
yeah,
survive and to belong in this world and to be,
yeah,
figure out what you want to be and stuff. It was just, some people, they figure it out, or sometimes, but like there's this part of me that it's like I'm way too much of myself to like even try, and I kind of know I won't survive, but finding my own way and encouraging myself and questioning like the inner critic is important. Like, our inner critic is really just other people's beliefs, and it's other people's stuff. It's not even
yeah.
our
Like,
own
all
thoughts,
stacked up on each other. Yeah,
Exactly. And that's another thing to consider, and doing the shadow work, but also like even when the negative entities also provoke, with the criticism, and I like to think that they don't like try to put things in there, but they just kind of like take advantage of where you're at, and
yeah,
just, you know what I mean?
yeah.
Uh okay. I saw a ghost in that vibration. I was really Story time. I was really upset and mad on the inside, and I was making pancakes for my sister and I. And our kitchen, from where I was, making the pancakes, I could see down the hallway. The hallway was dark, right? And my sister, she's just watching me make pancakes, and I guess I was just like in my head a lot. And like when you're in your head, you're not really paying attention to like what you're doing, too
Hmm.
much. And I'm just, trying to do these pancakes, but I'm in my head, it's like this anxiety and all this stuff, right? And I start to see something out of the corner of my eye, something white. And coming out of the hallway, it's getting closer. It's getting a little bit closer. It's getting a little bit closer. And I'm like, at first, I'm just kind of like, whatever, But then for some reason, I get annoyed and I get really mad for no reason, seemingly, and I yell, get out in front of my sister. And she doesn't see shit, she doesn't see anything.
Yeah,
And then she's like, who are you yelling at? And I just stayed quiet. It was just her and me. And I just like, I didn't explain it. I was like, that's the first time I saw a ghost. It was this, almost like this woman in white, and she had like a really long dress, and she was walking really slow. And I, looking back on that situation, I kind of feel bad. I yelled at her because I don't think she deserved it. For
mm,
some reason, I yelled at her to get out, and luckily it was only in front of one person. Otherwise I would have looked a lot more crazy. But
yeah,
it that was the time. like I saw a ghost, and it was just unintentional, you know. Um,
I love how you introduced the story, which is you talked about the vibration that you're at and what you're doing and how you're feeling. Like it that is so important for like you could say for everything, right? But um includes like when you see angel numbers or signs or feathers or like car bumper stickers or whatever it is that you experience when you do feel a presence in a room, or you see a shadow in the corner of your eye, or you staring at something and it kind of looks like this had me for years, right? Entities absolutely do hide in front of things that look similar to like human shapes, and you're like, that's a thing. And it's like, of course it's a thing. It's like if you're a magician, right? And you wanted to, or you want to hide somewhere, you look for something that looks like you. But as soon as you turn your attention to it and go, like, I see you, like they hate it. And literally you'll see if you turn your focus and like, because I often see them on my morning run. I run at 5 a.m. in the morning. So usually it's dark, not this time of year, but usually in Scotland it's dark, and I'll pass trees and lampposts, and like we have a lot of these kind of little metal boxes for internet and telephone equipment, and they're absolutely they're hiding because they don't like me seeing them, because they don't want to be seen, because what they're typically doing at that time is little critters are like running around between houses and feeding off people's nightmares and whatever, creaking around people's houses, and they're just annoyances, right? But you as soon as I see it, that's the first thing I ask myself is like, what are you doing, John? Like, and what are you thinking? What are you feeling? It's like, oh yeah, I was like worrying about that thing because I can see them because I'm in that vibration of I'm worrying about my to-do list. And will I get all these things done today? And and then it's like, how does that feel? Oh, it feels actually quite low vibration. And then I look at the thing and I tell it, I see it. Now, this is a whole different like video, right? And I guess we'll have to stop eventually today. But there's this whole thing where you can just say, this is my boundary. Like if it's in your physical boundary, like within about 2 meters of you, tell, like if you don't want it there, just tell it to leave. And you can do things like ask what it is, ask what its intentions are. If it's in your home, you can also ask it to leave. If you're not in your home, if you're out in the street or you're in some other building or just somewhere in nature, wherever you are in the world, you're not like uh, a god, right? You don't have power over everything to tell it to just leave a place just because you don't like it. And you do remind me of a quick story I'll tell, which is when I was at a meditation teaching class last year, and I told everyone in the class, oh, I'm like, that was a big thing for me, telling people I'm psychic. And it's like, there's no like, there's no pitchforks and torches. This is great. These guys are great. But then what started happening is when we're doing meditations as a group, these ghosts would come into the room and they were watching us. And my immediate reaction was like, get out of here. You're not allowed in here, blah, blah. And this all happened in one day. And I told the class members this, and they're like, what, John? And is it right? Is it there? Is it right there? Is it there next to me? That happened loads. Like your teacher was, you're worrying like what your teacher is thinking when you're staring at something. And it's kind of the next step is people then saying, oh, like, could you ask it a question? Like, and what's its name? Where does it come from? Like, no, this is all really distracting. And I told them to leave, and the same ghost came back, and it was a couple, and they'd owned the stables that we were having, like about, when was it? About 300 years ago, and where we were doing the meditations. And the husband came back, this ghost, and he's like, John, you can't like just tell us to leave. It's our home. Like, how dare you? And the wife came back, and she was like wearing this dress, like a wedding dress. It's like, look at me, like I'm actually a really nice person, and like you were so rude to us. And so I ate humble pie, and I was so apologetic to them. And I said, look, please, how about compromise? You just give us space, like especially when we're meditating, because I in particular find it so distracting. And I know a couple of others were sensitive enough to know that they were there. And it feels like, when we're answering those Ghostbuster calls and like, hello, it's not always, not all ghosts are bad. Always check, always feel with your heart like what their vibration is, but also know that there's a lot of good beings out there too.
Yeah.
That's a judgment, John. But there's lots of beings that actually have your best intention at heart. And yeah, catch yourself about how you're feeling, um and just use your discernment.
Yeah. Um, another another thing I wanted to share, like you could say like a symptom of like when you're like with someone like me who was experiencing shadow figures. I mentioned about the vibration of shame. I mentioned, the other emotions. I mentioned questioning judgment, and I think I already mentioned dreamed shadow beings, but sometimes I was actually able to see things that weren't necessarily like shadow beings, but they were like weird. Um, they sometimes I would like see shapes, right? And even though they're just shapes, they have a bad vibe to them. And
Yeah.
I would see things like with my eyes closed. Like if I saw it with my eyes open and I closed my eyes, and I would do that sometimes because I'm like, I don't want to see this. And then I close my eyes and like it's still there, even though like I still
It's like your
see it,
third eye
even
is still open.
exactly. Yeah, like I didn't even know what that was. I was like, why am I seeing things? And even when I close my eyes, they're still there.
Mhm.
And that was happening to me like quite often. I would like see like I would even sometimes get jump scared by like certain images, and especially like at night, when I
Mm.
can't sleep because I have terrible insomnia since like second grade. But I would like try to sleep, and then I'll like get like a gross image, or I'll see some weird shape, or there'd just be like scary imagery like coming into my mind, like when I close my eyes, or sometimes it's there when I open my eyes, and it's a weird thing, and it's like it's got to be my third eye, but like I've never done anything, to like I didn't know what that was, like I
Yeah.
and that
Mm.
was one of the things that freaked me out the most, because I'm like, wait a second, like if I
There's
could
no
still
off
see it,
switch.
yeah, it's like if I could see it with my eyes closed, like I don't even know what this is. Like, what do you call that? Like, am I crazy? Like, I don't understand. Like, is this a crazy thing? It's like, well, if it's not real, then why should I still see it with my eyes closed? And that really creeped me out, because the things that I was seeing were like really horrific, and like violent, and like
Mhm.
gory, and it was like I was seeing. It's an exaggerated way of saying it. It was almost like I was seeing like visions of hell. It was just like
Yeah.
really, really weird stuff.
It's a
And
grim
yeah.
place.
Some people that I know that I knew who were also in a similar vibration to me, when we spoke about it, they also mentioned sometimes getting sleep paralysis.
Hmm.
I've
Yeah.
never gotten sleep paralysis, but I'm thinking that could also be a thing maybe someone might experience, being in a low vibration, and possibly, besides seeing shadow figures or having dreams, but like also sometimes people have these sleep paralysis, and there's like some kind of demonic creature that's just like being weird around them, and stuff, and you can't move, and it's I've never experienced that, and I'm kind of glad I didn't, because that sounds terrifying.
Yeah. Yeah.
um
I know, yeah, one of my clients has that, and some of their family members too, as well. I think it's, and often these things run in the families, right?
oh
And even if like a lot of, I would say everything, including that ghost experience and then all the things you were just describing about shadow figures, like for the population of the world that have experienced those, a very small number will talk about it, will share it. Um, and I think for one of the primary reasons, like when I kind of shut myself down about the age of 6 years old, was because people would either get very scared because it was often in their bedrooms and stuff. It's like, hey mom, look, I saw the shadow figure in your room, and she was like, they're not real, like ghosts. There's no such thing as shadow figures, and like they're not, and like, well, they look pretty scary, and it, shutting yourself down, or the different forms of that, like just no longer talking about it, um, just unfortunately it creates more silos and more fragmentation, where actually it is an important part of our reality, and they are very much real, and yeah, I can imagine. And I think you're the first person that's shared that when your third eye was open, so you're closing your eyes, because usually that's enough, right?
Yeah.
Even if you can feel them in your room, or you put your magic duvet over your head that's, can stop bullets and, axe murderers and stuff. And yeah, I think that's just a really powerful journey to acknowledge. And I think if at very least, by sharing this, that other people will at least just share some of their stories,
Mhm.
um, will really really help bring the reality to these experiences. Um, and also the reality that you're not powerless. Like, you can literally just say no, like, I don't want you in here, because they're real. Good news. Just like if a physical person was in your house, you can tell them to leave. You can also tell something that's metaphysical.
Mhm.
um I am conscious of time,
Yeah.
and I am thinking, it was just occurred to me, uh that we could also split this up into a series, because we've recorded like 2.5 hours, so we could do like 2 or 3 parts. So if anyone's watched this and it was split up, that was a great idea. um, but yeah, I do want to thank you for going on this incredibly transparent and, must I add, well articulated journey. Like, a lot of what you describe is just so difficult to put into our limited human words, and it's fantastic to be able to share all the dark side,
Yeah.
the dark side of our spiritual, and it's not everything spiritual, right? It's our reality, and just creating a safe space. I find it personally very helpful to share shadows, and just
Yeah.
hearing about yours and your journey, and the incredible like traumas that you've overcome, and like largely all by yourself, is just
Yeah.
hugely impressive, and it's really inspirational. And I can see why your soul, thought you were ready for this, because look what you've achieved. You've come so far, and even just showing some appetite, and you seem really eager to help others, is incredible, because the world needs you. So thank you.
Thank you for that amazing compliment, John.
My pleasure.
Yeah. Um, are you ready to end it, or if there's
I think
anything you
so.
should say at the end?
I was just gonna say, um, yeah, for anyone watching, please feel free to reach out to me if you have any questions you want to share, any experiences. I would say it's quite incredible that how few people do. I would say maybe once a week someone will share something with me, and that's like a busy week. Um, and sometimes, no matter how shameful it feels, and how scared you are of judgment in other, from others, just sharing your experience, and this keeping in mind that I've had clients that have destroyed entire universes in past lives. Like, if you want to judge something, judge, like, you know think of the things that people could have potentially have done as beings around this universe, and remember that, not to belittle your own shame, your own pain, but to know that in perspective, it's just ourselves that judge ourselves. And so do feel free to reach out. um, and I'll not give you a big sales pitch, but you can visit my website, and it's jonbinnie.com, and you'll see, explore my range of services of one-to-one sessions. I have the higher self foundational training, which we just closed. So that's starting to run for this class, which Nova's in for the next couple of months. I also have the intermediate training, which overlaps. So that's the more advanced version of it's the Everything John Knows training course, which starts early August. And then it was funny, you were mentioning a course I'm also going to develop, which is the kind of I don't know if it's a training course, but it's something along the lines of an apprenticeship for negative entity removal, exorcism, and soul retrievals, like all the dangerous stuff. Um, and I, it's going to be a hard course to develop, but I know that the further I go on my journey without developing this, the longer it'll take other people to at least learn what I learned, the way I learned it. Not that any of us are ahead of each other. Um, and I have a membership group. I have merch. I have a song every day. TikTok, Instagram, YouTube, just all the things. And so feel free to check me out. And if any of this resonates with you, and if it doesn't, at least uh, get in touch with Nova or people. You know, reaching out to other people is just so hugely powerful. And so I hope at least it helps people. We've helped you be able to find someone else that you would be able to talk to on your journey. Just find people that you you resonate with their energy, and you know, they're helping you face your fears and get the support you need.
Yep. I don't know what else to say. I guess you could put my link in the description for my shadow work series and my cult series, where I kind of go more in depth of my journey in that darkness and my awakening and how I got out of it, and also my shadow work series, where the things that I was learning was helping me overcome the negative entities, but it was ultimately because my vibration would improve, so they wouldn't be attracted to me as much. That's at least the way I see it. Um, and I know we're probably gonna have more videos, and we'll probably talk more about, like, we just kind of talked about like the grounded aspect of it, starting with feelings, starting with vibration, and starting with limiting beliefs. I think most people could kind of understand, and then your perspective also like helps for like a person to understand like how do we remove the entity? How do you see it? Like, what's your perspective on these entities, and a little bit of your own stories about, you know, shadows. And I really find these things like intertwined, you know, negative entity removal and, you know, exorcism and like shadow work. It's all like, to me, it really feels like it's like it's interwoven, you know, it's how do we
Yeah,
not talk about these things, right?
that's right.
So I think hopefully in our next session, you know, we might talk more like into like the interesting questions, or like some other questions that kind of range from, you know, the different perspectives, you know, because we have to break down a lot of the implication of the words themselves, and like, you know, exorcism and paranormal and like all psychic and all these different things, because it just leads down to more and more interesting
Right.
questions, you know, and not even necessarily about negative entities, but like that's the thing where it's like, if this is real, then like these other things, like what about those things too? Because it really opens up your perspective as to like what's possible. And if it is, you know, are there other people who know more about this, you know? And yeah, I think that's what we'll talk about more and make more distinctions on later next
Definitely.
time.
Oh, I'd love that. Yeah, and if anyone has any questions for us, let us know in the comments wherever we've decided to post this.
Yeah.
That'd be really cool. But yeah, I'd love to explore those in more detail. And it always feels good to me, as well as doing all the light work, that I'm always doing some um shadow dark work at the same time, because I know that when I'm too much in one, you know, you're missing out on the other. You're missing out on at very least inspiring others to talk about their experiences. So yeah, I'd love to do this more often. um so yeah, thank you very much.
Yeah. Thank you
I'll
too.
say goodbye to everyone, and I'll be stopping our recording now. Thank you,
All right.
everyone. See you again soon.